click my slides, that'd be awesome. Okay, so that's a good kind of rounded background. So this morning, I know a Saturday morning, it's tough to get up and get started, but today we're going to I'm going to overwhelm you with information from lots of different perspectives. My perspective is digital marketing is my focus, but really I've got a little bit of an agenda of kind of wrapping everything together and how your path into this world and into your career really is. I believe in what Steve Jobs said many years ago, which was it's about connecting the dots. And he looks backwards and connects the dots, but I look backwards, but I also look forward in connecting the dots. And I think it is possible to look forward in the future and connect the dots. And that's what we're going to, I'm going to introduce you to a bunch of different technologies and things that are happening in the future. And I want you to be thinking about your dots and how you can connect them all. So to begin, we're going to we'll talk about my dots. And I know that on a Saturday morning, it's the last thing you want is someone to get up and talk about themselves, but it is my favorite topic. And I do have a captive audience. But really, we're going to not necessarily look at my dots, but you'll see the path of how everything's connected for me. My life's not been perfect by any means, but the dots that I have connected, I want you to think about your dots as I talk about some of the crazy things in my life and how they've all kind of led me to the things that I'm doing now. So I grew up as a childhood circus performer. My family had a farm in Winfield. My dad was a physician, and my mother was just crazy. So we had all these, it was like a gentleman's farm, and they were all kind of rescued animals and saved from something, and a big collection of animals. So I grew up with, being chased by a mean rooster, and my mother had just a herd of dogs and a herd of donkeys and ponies, and my dad decided that he wanted to raise money for the Project Hope ship in Africa that went around and delivered care to people in Africa. So we decided what we'll do is we'll train all of these rescue animals to do a circus. And that was my childhood. We did it for 10 years. And I remember, like, every summer it started off and we had, 20 people show up for our little circus. But by the time we were like 12 and 14 and we'd gotten really good at our circus, we were having thousands of people come from, all over. It was right in Linfield to watch the circus. So fast forward, I'll hit this button right here. And one of the themes of my family is education. So I fast forward, you get up to my years of education. My mother said you could do whatever you want with your life, but you have to get a college degree first. So I went off to get my college degree. She never really said whether it was what kind of college degree. So I went and I got my undergraduate, and then I realized as I was graduating that I had these really expensive hobbies like riding horses, and I was going to graduate and be an intern and make $16,000 a year. Now, I'm really old, so that was a while ago, but I realized I wasn't going to be able to support my lifestyle. So I went back and I got a master's degree, and then I'm one of those people that when you take me to a buffet and it's one of those buffets that's $10, I will like to eat $20 worth of food. If you take me a $40 buffet, I want to eat $80 worth of food. I'm a person that's really attracted to free stuff. Maybe that's the Yankee in me. So I started working at a company, and I realized that they had a tuition benefit that was I would get free tuition someplace. So I went and I got my MBA for free over at Bentley, and then I also went on to BU, and I got my master's in computer science just because it was free. And then, kind of fast forward a little bit, I realized I wanted to start teaching, and unfortunately, 2 master's degrees does not equal a PhD in the educational world. I kind of didn't realize that. So and until you have a PhD, you're nothing. So I had to actually go back and get a PhD. And then I started to get really interested in all of the different ways, and this was back, 10 years ago, all the different new ways that it was just when online was coming out for online learning and stuff. I started to get kind of interested in that stuff. So next slide. And by the time I finished all my degrees, I realized I had a bunch of different things that really interested me. And this is where you stop and you have to, if you can figure out how to do something that you're passionate about, and make that your work, you will never really technically work a day in your life. And I do go to work and I do make money, but I don't consider, I work 7 days a week, but I don't consider any day of my life work because I enjoy what I do. And this is the secret to it, is I got to the point where I'd had a bunch of education, I'd had a bunch of weird experiences with crazy animals, and I had, I loved animals and horses and donkeys, and I love puppies and dogs, and I like doing great things for the environment. So that was another kind of data point in my world. I have this weird fascination with RFID, and we're going to get to that later. I love tracking things with technology. And I also like writing. I wanted to become, when I first went off to college, I wanted to major in English. And my mother's like, no, because you're not going to live with me for the rest of my life. You have to go out and get a career that you can actually earn income. So she made me go into, she's told me repeatedly, I'm not supporting you or your horses as soon as you turn 21. And she wasn't kidding. So I ended up majoring in MIS, and I never got to do any writing. So probably when the social media started to really come out, what I did was I harnessed the power of everything, all of my dots, okay? I love horses, so I created the Equine Rescue Network on Facebook. The thing that fascinates me so much about, if you really think about it, and I know you guys have been fascinated so many times, think about all of the different business models that social media has created. So my business model was, I'd always been rescuing things. I try to stay rescuing horses. I tell people I rescue horses, not people. And so I started rescuing horses, and we would rescue horses down in Pennsylvania that were about to go to slaughter, and I'd bring them back up to Massachusetts, and we'd work with them and train them and try to find homes. It was really a laborious process. And then I realized what I'm not doing is I'm not leveraging my dot. If I take my PhD in computer science, and my dissertation topic was on social media and social presence before social media was really even a strong thing in the world. And I thought, well, if I could figure out how to create a new business model. So what I do is there's 160,000 horses that go to slaughter across the border in Canada and Mexico, and even they ship them to Japan each year. And so there's kind of holding pens throughout the country. There's 34 of them. And I have gotten this network of 225,000, roughly 225,000 people that I have volunteers that go into the kill pens, and they take pictures of the horses before they go to slaughter. Then they create their pages, and we share them across. And so I share these horses, pictures of the horses. I raise money, and through my network, I fundraise through my network, and I also find homes through my network. And I never see these horses. Like right now, today, I'm rescuing horses in Texas, and I'm rescuing another horse in Louisiana. I'm hoping to rescue a couple donkeys in Louisiana too, but that's still unknown. So that's what I do on my network. That's a new business model, and I've just kind of tied in all the different passions that I have. Now my mother, on the other hand, I call her Crazy Carlene, and she started her passion is dogs. She's always loved Great Danes. And she decided about 15 years ago that she was going to take we had so many Great Danes, she's going to give them a job. So she put a harness on them, and she has a bunch of health issues. And she was using one of her dogs to help her walk, and it would wear this harness. She designed a harness out of a horse halter, and she would use her Great Dane to help her get around. And so she came to me and she's like, you know what, I'm going to start training Great Danes to help people walk. And I was like, so whatever, she's got her own farm, she's training Great Danes. I don't know how many people have ever seen Bella and George. They had a viral video that's probably up to 70 million people that have viewed it. They've been on all the ABC News and Fox News, and they're actually out in California right now filming for some show called Doctors. George is Bella's an 11-year-old girl, and she's like this tall because she's got some, I can't even remember the name of the disease that she has, but basically her internal organs grow and her skeletal frame does not. And she has a very short lifespan. And one of the things that will make her lifespan a whole lot shorter is if she doesn't keep moving. And so when we met Bella and George, and I'm the chairman of the board for the Service Dog Project, so I'm very involved in the Service Dog Projects and the applicant process. We met Bella, and Bella was in a wheelchair. She could walk. She is weight bearing, but she's just so wobbly, but she's so small. She weighs like 40 pounds. And so she wanted a service dog, because the more she gets up and walks, her muscles won't atrophy, and she will continue to heal. So most of the dogs, she's really small, and she's very, very wobbly, and she has a squeaky voice, and all the rest of the dogs were like, "Ooh, we don't know what to do with that." And our dogs were being trained for adults, not small children. But this one dog, George, seemed to just love Bella, and George became Bella's service dog. And the first couple months, she just held on to George's little handle, and George dragged her around, and her little feet would always try to catch up. But she's grown stronger and stronger, and now George takes her around wherever she goes, and he flies on planes. They flew down. He won the Service Dog Award for the year, so they flew down to Florida to accept the award. And this gigantic dog who weighs 165 pounds, he goes on an airplane, and he fits everywhere. So one of the things, the reason I tell you all about the Service Dog Project is it's incredibly expensive to raise Great Danes and to run this. She has she's got, I don't know, 11 employees that help run 24 hours on the farm. So we partnered with this, she's got a Facebook page, and yeah, she's got about 50,000 followers on Facebook, whatever. Facebook, it's really not about the number of followers, it's about the engagement. And she has very, very strong engagement on social media, but that's not necessarily a good place to raise the kind of money that she needs to run her organization. The Annenberg Foundation that runs explore.org, they have very deep pockets. So we partnered with them through this explore.org. And if you go to explore.org, there's all these different boxes of interesting places throughout the world. And if you see, there's a couple boxes that have Great Danes in them. And those are webcams that are on the Service Dog Project that's over in Ipswich. So there's, in the puppy training room, in the playroom for the dogs, out in the dog paddocks outside, there's these webcams, and people go. Can you imagine how many people have gone to the webcams to see Great Danes? 12 million people have gone to visit. At any given time, there's about 5,000 people sitting there watching a puppy sleep. And the interesting thing about all this is she does some great fundraising. And oh, by the way, in the bottom here, if you scroll down, there's a discussion area. So you'll be watching the puppy room, and people will be discussing and commenting with each other. And they start to get this engagement going on that's really, it's very social. And these people have connected with one another. And so there's people throughout the world that are watching these puppies. And it's a little bit addicting at times. I find myself in my office like, oh, I wonder what the dogs are doing today. And so she has people all around the world in hospital beds. And the good thing that the Service Dog Project does is not just help little Bella, but all these people watching the cameras that are, in wheelchairs and, homebound. And we've seen this growth of people that have connected with one another in a society, and they call it the Extreme Puppy Watchers Group. The Extreme Puppy Watchers Group is a group on Facebook now, and she's fundraising. Her fundraising budget is about $600,000 she raised last year to keep operations going. So again, all different interesting business models. All right, so remember I said my other dot was I like to write. So what I started doing was I just like to write. So I started writing a blog. And here's the blog that I mentioned before. I said, why I rescue horses and not people. That's kind of my tagline. And so I started writing my blog, just kind of for my own, as I like to write. And then I realized, if we have an audience between the Service Dog Project and with her gigantic audience on Explore, and people think, if you think digital marketing, people always think digital marketing, social media, I got to get out there. But people automatically think Facebook. But you have to figure out where your audience is, and it may not be on Facebook. Like my mother's big audience is on Explore, so we do all the marketing through Explore, subtle. relationship building through Explore. And I realized she's got this big following there. I've got a big following on Facebook, because I started my project way back when Facebook was very early in the infancy stages. So I was just on Facebook. Like Twitter, nobody used Twitter back then. So I started writing my blog. It started doing really well. Like this is one blog that has 3,200 people shared it. So that means you multiply that by the average network, which is 338. So a lot of people saw that. And if you look at, and I started to learn, like some of my blog posts I'll get like 100 people will share, and others I'll get 5,000. So I started writing, and then I realized, well, if I take all my blog posts and I roll it up into creative space, I can write a book. So I wrote a book. So I took all my blog posts, I rolled them all up and I kind of edited it so it had a theme, and it starts off with the donkeys and all the fun stories. So I wrote a book. Oh, that I then marketed through the explore.org and my own social media on Facebook. And I raised $45,600, which I split between the Service Dog Project and the Equine Rescue Network. So if you like to write, this is an opportunity. And this never, before social media, before digital media, this did not exist, this potential to raise $45,000 just by doing something that you love. Okay. So one of the things I've learned is not all the dots connect. Now, I don't know if there's any entrepreneurs in the room, but average entrepreneur fails 7 times before they're successful. I wish that my number was only 7. I failed at a whole bunch of things. And this is one of my, I wouldn't say that it's complete failure, but it's pretty much a failure. So what I decided to do was, now I love technology, I love RFID, and I love tracking things. And if you put a microchip in your dog and your dog gets lost, and somebody finds your dog with scans, they can call you. And so I thought, okay, well, if I could get everyone in this country to put a microchip in their horse, and then all the different slaughter plants, if I could get them scanning before they slaughter a horse, there's a point where I could connect back and say, you know what, your horse is about to be slaughtered. This is your, because it's a long story on how horses get there, but they do. And then I could say, if anyone ever called me, any horse that I ever rode or owned, I would want to help that horse. So I had this plan of how I was going to implement all this. But what I didn't calculate was, and this is where, like big marketing companies spend a lot of money on focus groups. I started this whole thing and everybody loved the idea. I pitched it to a bunch of people, and I went down to Kentucky and I met with the jockey club, I met with the saddlebred people at all these different horse breeds. Everybody loved the idea. But what I didn't realize is that there are people that want to lose their horses in the crowd, and they don't want to know, and they don't want their horse back. And so people weren't willing to buy the chips in order to, and I got, the slaughter people the houses were willing to scan and everything, but I only sold like 2,000 chips after all that work. So I didn't.
How much was the chip?
$25.95, and that included lifetime registration. So, and roughly, because the way that was going to work was that some of the proceeds from because the chips were only costing me $4, and the registration was costing me $7, so there was a lot of profit in there. That was going to roll back into my Equine Rescue Network. It was going to be a social business, and it was going to kind of keep the money coming in, was going to roll back in, and it never worked. So anyways, but what I have not given up, because I do love technology and I do love the idea of, but what happened before was the other variable was the slaughter plants closed here and they started shipping horses to other places. So that really kind of killed it too, because now people say, oh, they don't slaughter horses in the United States, but they don't realize that the same number of horses is being slaughtered just in other parts of the country. So that was part of my business failure. And when you're an entrepreneur, you start looking at how you're going to be successful and all the different environmental variables. There's a lot that really impacted the failure of that business. But I'm still not giving up. And that Einstein says, what's the theory that Einstein says? You do the same thing. Insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So I haven't given up. Or I also think that maybe failure is not an option. But what I've done is now I've decided that I'm not going to worry about who's buying the chips, because all of the big breed associations, it's now coming down to they're all requiring horses to be chipped. And that's a new change in the industry that's happened in 2016. Is now by 2017, all the big horse registries are all going microchip. So you have to microchip your horse. Now, I'm not going to get back into the sales, but what I've decided to do was develop a phone app. Again, another point of how digital can really impact the world around us, our offline world. So I'm now developing a phone app so that what you can do is you can scan your horse, put the number in, and click submit, and that will bounce off of all of these different registries and come up with any information that exists on that horse. So this is the work in process. I'm meeting down in June in front of I'm pitching it to all the breed associations once again to see if I can get that thing launched and get some funding to make that happen. All right, so kind of it all ties in. My world is all about social enterprise management. This is my last dot that I'm connecting, is that now I'm a professor over at New England College of Business. We do have a digital marketing program and a certificate and a concentration. My next area where digital marketing and social entrepreneurship really kind of ties in well together. My idea is to create a social enterprise management program so I can actually train people and teach students how to run a social enterprise. A social enterprise is a business that is either for-profit, like Tom's Shoes, where you buy a pair of shoes and somebody in Africa gets a pair of shoes, or a non-profit like the Service Dog Project. And so we'll be implementing that into fall of 2016. So those are all my jobs. So what I'm hoping to teach students is to focus on the different problems in the world related to, because we now live in a global world, and social enterprise management, I want my students to be looking globally at the different problems. So let's run through some of these different problems and how they're going to be impacted by the digital world. So the first one is the educational problem. What's the problem there? Students it's too expensive, raising tuition costs. So some of the different solutions that are coming into play that you probably are not aware of is, has anyone ever heard of Straighter Line? Straighter Line is a company that I'm just using Straighter Line as an example. There's 4 or 5 of them that are in that space right now, where you pay $99 a month and $49 a class. You can take as many courses that you want and pretty much bang out the first 2 years of general education requirements that any college degree would require, like your humanities, your histories, your writing. So at the end of the 2 years, you're paying like $4,000 a year for tuition instead of, what is it over at BU, $58,000. So you can get 2 years. And the interesting part is those are what they call ACE accredited. So they will be transferred into any different college. You can transfer those credits in. We have an agreement with Straighter Line at NECB, and we are NEASC, and the same accreditation. Like you could take those and go to Harvard, and they will accept your credits. So that's kind of interesting. Competency-based education. I just went to a seminar, or a conference down in Florida on competency-based education. So it ties into more of applied learning. It's great to have an undergraduate degree, but what can you do? Competency-based education is like, it makes sure that when you graduate, you can actually do what you say you're going to do. So it's really strong in nursing, where you have to learn how to be able to do an injection and things like that. So what they do is they take programs and they break it into, this is all the stuff that you need to be able to do in order to say that you're accomplished in nursing or digital marketing or something like that. So instead of taking courses, you actually take modules, and at the end of the module, it will say whether you take a test to see whether you're competent in that different area. So competency-based education, it doesn't necessarily mean that the tuition will be less, but you can go through it if you've already got the knowledge of something. Therefore, you can skip all the learning and just say, okay, I know how to do that, and take the test. So it's a different model that you're going to see a lot coming up. The other thing that we're going to see is competency-based ties into things that you are good at and you know. There's a company that's called degree.com, And Degreed.com, it's just been around for a couple of years, and what they're trying to do is, let's say that you guys are digital marketing professionals, right? And it's similar to the LinkedIn. It's where you want to showcase and profile that you're an expert in something. So you get a Degreed.com profile, and you select all the different things that you want to. You know, when in LinkedIn it says that you've got that area where people will recommend you and say that you're good at certain things, and all of your friends will go out there and say that you're good at project management, you're good at digital marketing. So this is similar to that, except nobody's going to vote for you, and just, you know, all your friends can't go out there and say, oh, she's really good at that, she's really good. This, you actually, the more that you do and the more that you learn, the higher your little dial goes. So for example, if I'm an accountant and I go out there and I take a course in accounting, I go to a seminar in accounting, I read an accounting book, my dial changes. So if you are, if you say you're a digital marketing professional, you go to NECB, you get the digital marketing certificate, you'll see your dial will go way up. If you say you watch a TED Talk on digital marketing, it'll go up a little further. And it really is a weighted scale, so it does give you a good indication of someone's area of expertise. We're going to see a lot more of this type of evaluation of candidates for hires and skills in the future. Okay, so the next big problem is water. I know it's really, we're at a digital marketing conference, but what we're thinking about is when it comes down to whether it's marketing, whether it's world problems, is we're seeing that technology and digital platforms can solve them. And when you look around this room and you're looking at your fellow marketers, you also want to be thinking about coming up with new and creative ideas that are a little different than someone who's sitting next to you, because their dots are different. And if you're trying to do one of the things that Gary Vaynerchuk, I don't know if you're familiar with him, he says is marketers ruin everything. And as soon as you come up with a good idea, everybody else jumps on the bandwagon, does the same thing. Like content marketing, everybody's on that right now, and there's too much information out there. So really, we've got to be thinking of strategies and different ways of solving. You're solving a marketing problem, so let's think about a different way to solve the water problem. I don't know if you're familiar with the water problem, but there seems to be a big global water problem that's killing 780 million people. Don't have access to clean water. 400. You can read through here and really quantify it. 80% of the illnesses that are linked to poor water conditions. There's people that are either drinking bad water and kills them, not getting enough water, it kills them. So water is a big problem, not necessarily in the United States, but it is around the world. Even though we live in a planet that has an abundance of water, most of it's salt water. So you got Dean Kamen. Does that name sound familiar? You know who that is? He's from New Hampshire. He's the Segway guy. All right. He's an inventor, and he's invented some very interesting things. But one of them that he's come up with that is this little device, and this little device you can actually hook it up to toilet water, and it will pump out clean drinking water. You could put it in the ocean, and it'll pump out clean drinking water. It's portable. He's trying to get it scalable. He's partnered with Coca-Cola to, because originally the first iterations of this machine, they were like $200,000 to create. They were not portable, and they weren't scalable. But he's worked now with Coca-Cola, and he's come up with a scalable and device that's about this high, and it'll pump out enough water for 100 people per day. And he's going around with Coca-Cola to try to get them into areas. There's a bunch of prototypes down in Africa right now, and he's hoping to bring that at a much broader scale, which is a good thing. And because if you just look at the number of people in this on the planet that are dealing with water-based illnesses, meaning they're in hospital beds. Half of the hospital beds are filled with people suffering from water-related diseases. If you think of the expense related to just that bullet item, this will solve a huge problem, all right? Okay, so the other problem that we're having is the scarcity of resources. So we've got 7 billion people on the planet, and it's projected to get up to 10 billion people. And when you run all the numbers, and you can read the slide, but basically the problem is we've got too many people and not enough planet. So what we need to do is start looking at ways to conserve and to come up with more resources. So the first way that we can do is we can address the sustainability problem. There's a city just outside of Abu Dhabi called Masdar. Has anyone ever heard of Masdar? Masdar is it's kind of a prototype city. There's about 2,000 people that are living there right now. They admit zero, their high quality of life, low environmental impact is their mission. Zero waste, zero carbon, and zero fossil fuels. And they're going to have 40,000 residents, 1,500 businesses, no cars. And this is your little people mover. It's a personalized people mover. I love this idea because I ride the subway, okay? You don't have to cram in this little box with 15,000 people during rush hour. You get your own little box, which is kind of nice. So we're seeing more and more. And when, if Masdar was able to do it, then we can use what they've learned in Masdar to pull that back to other cities around the world. Okay, so I spent a lot of time sitting in my office, just kind of like looking at theories. And one of the theories that we won't go into, it's the innovation. There's an innovation curve that really, if we look at humanity as we kind of go along, and all of a sudden we're standing up here and we're starting to invent the car and the printing press and things like that. So the rate that we invent things is actually going exponential, and every 100, it used to be like every 100 years something big came along, but if you look at what we've invented in the 19th century, we're really on a pretty fast scale at this point, going straight up. We've got we've had the car, we've had the printing press, we've had television, and now we've got the internet. So we're really moving quickly. But if you look at the rate of aluminum, all right, and this is where if you get a professor up in front of a crowd, I'm going to have to give you a history lesson. But my area of expertise is not history. But if you look at aluminum, it first came around at 23 AD, and the guy who invented it was invented in Italy, and the guy who invented it went to the emperor and said, "I have invented this great new metal. It's called aluminum." And the emperor thought about it. He said, "Well, I've got so much money invested in gold and silver," that he had the guy's head he had him beheaded because he didn't want aluminum to jeopardize his investment in gold and aluminum. So that was the end of aluminum till about the 1800s, when it resurfaced on at a dinner party. Someone had invented aluminum at a dinner party for Napoleon. He had his premier guests using aluminum silverware, and the servants were using gold because aluminum was such a prime resource and so scarce that it was such a valued. It was much more valued than gold. 1854, all of a sudden somebody came up with the first commercial process of extraction, which I don't really know what extraction does because I'm not an engineer, but I do know that it reduced the price of aluminum by 90%. And then if you notice, 6 years or several years later, the Tal Perot process was invented, and it made it cheap, light, and very accessible. But if you see, the thing that I'd like you to think about here is we've had a couple of years of it. It first came out, so they chopped the guy's head off. It came out here, and then it took us, almost a century, but we got to the point where aluminum was high value, and now it's just a commodity. It's like plastic to us. So if we take that same kind of learning curve where we throw something out there and then we let the technology kind of and let our expertise come in, we can take something that a big problem or we can take something from a high value into a commodity. All right, so welcome to 3D printing press. This revolution is going to change and become, right now, it's something that makes shit. It's the same stuff that aluminum's going to come out and be silverware. But the 3D printing press currently is making body parts. All right, it can make you a pizza, or it can make you chocolate, whatever you really prefer at that time. It can make shoes, clothes, wearables, plastics, drugs, drones, cars, dental implants and braces, and finally, it can make guns. And that's one of those things where you start to think of all of these new technologies that are coming up, and you say, guns. That means that if you decide that you want to kill someone, you don't have to, you can make your own gun and then just go do it, versus get it registered with the state. There will be a lot more illegal guns, is the bottom line of that. Every new technology has an unintended consequence. That will be one of them. But I envision that someday these 3D printers are going to be making our food, and will make life more sustainable here on this planet. This is another area when it starts to hit health. When you start to cure the health problems globally, people always think, oh, okay, well, that might impact the population, and we're going to see a spike in the population. Well, when you start to cure some of these problems, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation did research on people down in Africa, families down in Africa. They have 7 children, and that is, if you think about in the United States, we're kind of the 2, but people down in Africa have 7 children because 5 of them die, and they end up with 2. So what happens is when you start to cure the health things, you'll have a spike in the number of a spike in the population, but then it'll readjust based on the fact that the culture changes. So don't panic, because that if we solve these water problems and these medical problems, that we're going to have this huge population growth. We will for a short period of time, but it does adjust itself based on their research. So here's another cure the health problem is lab on a chip. Because in a lot of places, we live in the United States, things are pretty simple here, but in a lot of parts of the world, getting to a hospital, getting diagnosed, is a huge transportation issue, and it's just, medical care is not accessible. Lab on a chip is a little cell phone sized thing that you can do your tests, and you can come up with whether you've got Ebola, HIV, everything else, and it transmits all through Bluetooth and onto web. It's accessible to all different parts of the country. So that's another area where I would expect to see great growth. This is really the focal point for marketers. Why would Under Armour, which is a sporting clothing store, buy a phone app? Well, they're buying a phone app because in 2002, they bought Map Your Ride. I don't know if you guys or have ever used that. That does fitness, and it tracks for your routes that you do. But now they've come up with this new kind of building on that. They've come up with a new phone app where they track 5 metrics: your sleep, your activity, your fitness, your nutrition, weight, and how do I feel today? And the how do you feel today, well, if you can track it over time, like I want to know how I felt last year at this time. Well, this will tell me. And then what you could do is you can use IBM Watson, IBM's resurfacing, as this new term, data as a service. And data is really now, that's the commodity out there. So IBM, they can tap into IBM Watson, and you can compare your 5 metrics to people in your demographic throughout the country that are using the same app. So I can say, all right, well, I'm 51. How many other people, how am I doing my weight and my level of nutrition? How do I do compared to other people that are 51 in the United States? So that's a cool thing. And oh, by the way, it helps sell T-shirts because people that are out there doing more activity are going to buy more Under Armour T-shirts. Okay, so now what we're going to talk about in the last 10 minutes is the perfect storm that's brewing. If you think about Under Armour, like we're tying all these great things are happening, but what happens when big data analytics turns into the wrong hands? So now a lot of people, when I start talking about this, they think, oh, I'm talking about Trump. I'm talking about any presidential candidate has the access to the same information.
Yeah, sure.
I'm neutral here, but if you review history back in Germany and you compare what happened back in Germany with Hitler, they had an economic crisis, people were looking for change. They had a strong strong marketing campaign that was run by Hitler that basically said all of these populations, Jews, were inferior and dangerous. And if you've ever been on Facebook and watched how someone's kind of spiraled downwards based on false accusations, and the viral, people are more focused on learning bad things about people than good things. So this is all something that a strong marketing campaign. They listened to only what they wanted to hear, and then as soon as it got to the point where they started to question everything, it was too late because they were targeted. So fast forward, social media. This is what would happen if Hitler? If you think about what would happen if Hitler had access to the same technology in 2000 that we do in 2016. So if he had access to Facebook, he would, in big data analytics, he would be able to see everything you like. So if I liked something about gun control and I clicked that I liked gun control, I'd be labeled as that. So then he might even put stuff up there about the Nazi regime. And if I put a comment out there that I hated them and I shared what I shared and what I didn't share, he would start to target us into buckets of supporters and non-supporters. And then he could go in and he could flip over to Google and do Google searches on us, learn more about what we're doing. Oh, and we're using kind of meetups to go meet with people and Eventbrite. He'd know where you guys were today. And he could use Google Maps to find out actually where we live. If we think we can get offline and hide from Hitler, we couldn't, because you do realize that anything online stays online. Data storage is so cheap that he could still track us, and by going into the past history. And we're going to talk about Internet of Things in a second. So if you are going to live offline, you can't even get a map to get around. You're not going to be able to use your phone. There's no phone apps, no GPS. If you want to buy a map, you would probably have to go onto eBay, because they don't sell maps in Cumberland Farms anymore. I don't know why in the past 5 years I've had to go buy a map. They don't sell them. So you're going to have to avoid ATMs. You're going to have to avoid the tolls, because there's the little speed passes are all RFID and enabled, so that to be able to track you there. No coffee visits, no apps. So the Internet of Things, this is a buzzword that you've probably heard before. This is when devices start talking to devices ubiquitously. So that means my phone and your phone, my phone talks to other things. My phone talks to the Wi-Fi, my phone talks to stuff. It talks to the Starbucks every day when I do my Starbucks app. That's the Internet of Things. You're going to have your toaster, like your phone, you can now set the heat on your house and the Internet of Things. So, here we go. Okay, so the Internet of Things, all of these devices talk to each other based on RFID. Again, we went all the way back to my original dot. I've had this fascination with these things. The Internet of Things is your refrigerator knows that the milk that you're putting in the refrigerator is expired based on the RFID chip that's in the cap on the milk bottle, has a date on it. When you put it in there or you pull it out, the refrigerator will tell you that you're going to be out of milk. So that's where all of this stuff is happening. You have passive tags so that chips will they have no power in them. But they can only talk to 10 feet. There's a lot of data that's flying around and a lot of devices that are talking to each other that makes it a little bit interesting. But what they've done is, and you can understand this from a marketing standpoint, the RFIDs have solved the shoe problem for manufacturers. Because if you're a shoe store, have you ever gone to buy a pair of shoes at a shoe store and you could only find one because somehow the shoe store has lost the other one? So this allows shoes to be tracked, so that each one of my shoes has an RFID chip in it. And it's a beautiful thing for marketers, because they can track how long these shoes have survived. The whole product life cycle knows how long the shoes are in circulation, and knows when they end up in the landfill. So it's a really great thing for shoe manufacturers. But if you're that guy that has decided to go to one of the anti-Nazi parties through Eventbrite. You were smart enough. You're not online anymore, but you decided to sneak off to one of those Nazi parties. Well, you know what? Your shoes are going to give you away, because when you walk into the door of that, there may be an RFID reader, so you're going to get caught based on your shoes. And if you don't get caught based on your shoes, your tires will definitely give you away, because tires also have RFID chips in them. So these are some of the areas of ubiquitous computing you don't even know about, but all of that data is floating all around us. All right? So, but people say, oh, we have rights to privacy, but they can't collect that data because we don't tell them we can do that. Well, I always say that we are one more terrorist attack away from giving up our more privacy rights. And back in 2001, we have the Patriots Act. After the 9/11 and the World Trade Center collapsed, all of America said, I don't care what data you collect on us, as long as you don't let that terrorists, those bad guys into America, you can have my, access to my phones, my internet service providers, just anything you need, go ahead. So we gave up all these rights, and slowly we've been taking them back. Some of the rights have expired as of 2015, but we're one more terrorist attack away from giving up more rights. And I don't think the next terrorist attack is going to be an airport. It's going to be something a little bit more stealthy. And if you think about all of the electronic banking that goes on, if you went to the ATM and you stuck your card in and it said, and it came up on the screen and you asked for your balance and it said, error, I don't know your balance. Wouldn't you panic? And what happened in 1929? People panicked. So I think it's going to be something a little more stealthy than bringing down planes and making them fly into buildings. It may be a smart grid, because all of the smart grids that are saving us money and creating a sustainable energy footprint for the United States, based, again, Bill and Melinda Foundation is doing all this work with smart grids, but the grids are digital anyways. But we found malicious code on the smart grid system. So that means that if Hitler had access, he could go and he could program our grids to turn on or off your electricity based on what you liked and didn't like on Facebook, because all of that data is out there. So for example, this would be an example, if he figured out that you live in a neighborhood and it's January and it's cold and all the power grids are digital, he could decide that he could shut your power off. This is a mobile app for the Boston trash collectors. And if you see, these trash cans need to be emptied. The green ones, they've been empty recently. So he could have that same kind of mobile app and say, you know what, that house needs to be shut off, that house needs, and triangulate the data. All right. And lastly, if you think you can sneak off, I've got 2 minutes left. If you think you can sneak out of this country and get away, then you should wear a bag over your head, basically, because with new video surveillance that'll pick up your facial recognition, the new advancements in retina scans, you can't get in and out of an airport without having someone recognize you. That's how they do the no-fly zone. That's how they tell if you're on that no-fly list. So the biometric information. If you think back to the aluminum, we're kind of climbing up that scale and escalating pretty quickly. Okay. So to end on a good note, with 1 minute left to go, it's your opportunity here to create new business models, to do great things, whether it's profitable or non-profitable, or for a for-profit business or a non-profit business. All this is enabled through technologies. There's great things that can happen and scary things that can happen. So hopefully we'll see more of the great things than the scary things. All right.